Welcome to the Lavender Effect's LGBTQIA+ Heritage Forum. Is spiritual and religious freedom an important part of LGBTQIA culture? That's certainly a question for our community, and we're delighted to have that discussion today. We'll have a 90-minute forum. This is being recorded and will be posted, is being posted to our Facebook page and soon to be our YouTube channel in the near future. The first hour will be a moderated discussion between our talented moderator, Reverend Sheena Metal, and our distinguished panel of spiritual pioneers. We request that all viewers keep your microphones on mute and cameras off until the Q&A session starts around 5:10, 5:15. So Reverend Sheena Metal has been a talk radio host in Los Angeles for over 26 years. She is also a spiritual counselor and interfaith minister at Founders Metropolitan Community Church here in Los Angeles. Sheena is also the founder of raisingthevibration.org, a nonprofit movement of peace, love, kindness, and unity. She is a consulting advisor to the Lavender Effect and a true pioneer. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Sheena Metal to the virtual stage.
Thank you, my friend. It's an honor to be here, an honor to serve on the board of directors for the Lavender Effect, and an honor to be a part of Founders Metropolitan Community Church, my home, and an honor to be here today with you, whom I love, and with all of these panelists whom I love and respect as my fellow clergy. And you know, I think that it's so important that we as members of the queer community identify with our spirituality, even if the decision has been made to have no spirituality. I'm such a firm believer not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There has been a rift since the beginning of time between quote unquote religion and the LGBTQIA+ community. And I think the time has come now for us to, as members of that community, to acknowledge our spirituality and to let that pride flag fly, as well as being proud members of the queer community. That was my idea behind not only today's forum, but future forums, and the idea that Andy and I developed of, is spiritual and religious freedom an important part of the LGBTQI+ community, and culture something that is important that we need to think about and take note of. When I was a young person coming to grips with my spirituality, the last year of high school, first year of college, and really asking all these questions, growing up in very conservative Orange County, California, and realizing that I was not an evangelical, a fundamentalist, that there were religions that I thought were lovely for others, but not for me, and trying to figure out who I was and where I came from and answer those questions, I found that I resonated so much with my queer friends who were asking all their own questions because they were coming out as gay or lesbian or bi or trans. And they were trying to figure out themselves. There was a level of soul searching happening with them. And that level of soul searching resonated with the level of soul searching that I was doing as somebody who was on a spiritual quest. So I have always thought of my sexuality and gender identity and my spirituality as kind of walking a path together and not two things that fought each other. And I'm hoping after today's discussion and hearing from these amazing people that maybe you all will feel the same thing, because freedom is what this country was built on. Sometimes, like all things, we fail, but the idea of coming here for freedom, the idea of this land being developed for freedom, we're starting to really get there. And whether it's spiritual freedom or it's sexuality, gender, sexual freedom, it's all freedom. And it's okay for all of us to develop our own spiritual palette and decide who we are and what we want to believe and how we connect with spirit in the same way that we're deciding where we fit in the LGBTQIP2SAA community, right? And the answer is all answers are correct. Anywhere that you fit is where you fit. You're exactly as spirit made you. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Now be who you are and encourage others to be who they are. And that was really, I think, the idea behind this, right, Andy?
Yes,
Okay.
very much indeed. And I wanted to just note that this is the second spiritual forum that we've had.
Yes.
The first was a few years ago at MCC in Los Angeles, and that was a very powerful discussion as well. This is our first virtual discussion, and we hope to have many more. Thank you all for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'd love to introduce my panelists now. These are people that are going to change your life in the way that each of them has changed my life. So today we have the amazing Rabbi Heather Miller. She is the founder of Keeping It Sacred. And Pastor Lucia Chappelle. She is the Minister of Social Justice for Founders MCC. The amazing Reverend Mozingo. He is the senior pastor at Founders MCC and truly my ministerial mentor. And the beautiful Reverend Alejandro Escoto, who is the founder of MCC's Spanish-speaking ministry. Welcome you all. You all know how much I care about you and how much I admire you. And this was our first one, so I got to pick whomever I wanted. And guess what? I picked all y'all because I think you're wonderful. So let's start with you, Rabbi Heather. Tell us a little bit about your spiritual background and also where you fall within the queer community and how the two of those things resonate together for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it's such an honor to be here and support the Lavender Effect. What a great organization. Very much appreciated the work that they've been doing for many years now. I was raised in an interfaith household, actually. My dad is Unitarian and my mom is Reformed Jewish, 4th generation. So I'm 5th generation Reformed Jew from the Valley, San Fernando Valley in California. And I grew up in the 80s, and that was a very interesting experience to have a lot of pressure to become a Jewish American princess. I think all the girls wanted to become Jewish American princesses, and I couldn't for class reasons, I couldn't for religious reasons, because my dad was not Jewish and they would always say, you're not really Jewish, your dad's Jewish. And it was very hurtful, actually. And I also didn't really want to be a princess. I was more of a tomboy at the time. But it was very hurtful growing up. And so, I think that some of the connection between the queer community and my queer identity and my Jewish identity has been one of fortitude, one of really listening deeply to who I am inside. I had a tumor when I was 10, and it really causes you to ask the big questions. Who am I? What kind of life do I want to live if in this short life? And, why do bad things happen? And what kind of community can kind of get me through? And all of those questions I found, when I was kind of coming out in the 90s. So you asked what kind of a queer person am I? I'm someone who came out in the 90s as a lesbian. And I think that a lot of those big questions, like you said it perfectly, that soul searching is very much one and the same about, well, I have these choices. Do I want to be Unitarian or do I want to be Jewish? What does that mean? How do I want to live my life? Do I want to live my life out, or do I want to kind of closet parts of myself? So lots of that going on. I also identify as a wife. I have an amazing wife. I've known her for 21 years. We met in college. It's a very 90s love story. And we met in a class called Anti-Semitism in Historical Perspective, which was amazing because she's a Filipina and she was renounced her Catholicism by that point. She eventually converted to Judaism. So we have an interfaith, interracial, well, now it's not interfaith, but my in-laws are interfaith, family. And we've got 2 kids. And I identify as a nerd, a nerdy kind of an intellectual, kind of you know, very interested in activism and documentaries and just, you know, being in the streets and really trying to make the world a better place for all of creation.
It's beautiful. I identify as a nerd too. I think we're all going to have to call out today if we are nerds as well. I think I'm like a humanity wonk, because I'm just fascinated with all the different aspects of humanity and fascinated, Heather, and I know you are too, with everybody just being who they are. I mean, to me, my mama used to describe the universe as like a giant machine. And she would say that every one of us is like a little cog or a little wheel or a little belt in that machine. And if every one of us is doing just what we should be doing, then the machine runs more smoothly. And I think that points out such a beautiful picture of how all of our lives are important, right? We all matter. We're all here for a reason. And we were all made just the way we were supposed to be, because if everybody was the same, there would be missing parts in the machine. So I think sometimes people do a lot of worrying when you fall outside the box. You know, will I fit if I'm this? Will I fit if I'm that? And even when we start identifying as things like lesbian, or as I identify bisexual and intersex and now pansexual, my 18-year-old spirit daughter has taught me to identify as pansexual. So fantastic. We worry every time we're something new that someone's going to say that's not allowed. And I think to think of it like we're all just exactly who we're supposed to be. And that also means, right, ever changing, because just because you say you're something in the 90s, you evolve since then, and your spiritual palette and your sexuality and your gender and all of those things are continually in a state of evolution, as they should be.
And in the Jewish tradition, we believe that there's a saying that above every blade of grass is an angel saying, grow, grow. And so too is it with humanity, right? So like you said, right, we're all in process. We are all becoming, right? We're not beings, we're becomings. And that idea that we continue to become more and more of who we are, that very much resonates. So thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And you're such an inspiration, my friend. And I hope that everyone who is touched by you and your knowledge and your energy and your love of your heritage and who you are and your faith will be ever changed by that, as I'm hoping people will be today by all of you. So thank you, my friend. Pastor Lucia Chappelle, the social justice minister at Founders Metropolitan Community Church. I met you my very first day visiting Founders for a Sunday service. Went with our darling mutual friend, Reverend Steve Peters. And the more I get to know you, Pastor Lucia, the more I like you, the more I respect you, and the more I learn that there is a very interfaith side to you as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your spiritual history, where you identify spiritually, and then also, you know, where you identify and how you feel about how you fit into the queer community as well.
Okay, thank you, Sheena, and thank you, Andy, and everybody for having me here with you. I'm a bi-dyke, she series pronoun nerd. I'll confess.
Yay,
nerd. I was a very odd child. I was a very spiritually drawn child. I used to, when I was like 4, I would sneak downstairs Sunday morning to watch Oral Roberts before my parents got up instead of watching cartoons. When I was like 8, I threw a temper tantrum to get them to let me go to Sunday school. They were Baptist, but didn't really go to church that much. So they tossed me in with a neighbor who was Presbyterian, who walked past our house every Sunday, happened to be the superintendent of the Sunday school. So she took me to her Presbyterian church. And then I ended up in Episcopalian Girl Scouts and Catholic high school. And then I came to college in 1969. Now you can imagine what that was like. Totally, and still, every Sunday morning, regardless of what condition I might have been in, I was in the choir loft like a good little church girl, you know, singing every Sunday. But I was bored. The sermons were a sweet, sweet, lovely chaplain. Oh my gosh, he was a nice fellow, but he bored me to the point where I came back to the dorm one Sunday, and I was talking about the service, and I started pounding my head on the wall saying, I'm so bored, I don't know what to do. And another friend of mine said, you know, I think you might like that gay church. And I thought, yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. Just a few weeks later, I ended up meeting, we were out one night, going to bars, met a couple of people from the church who took us back to their apartment to sleep on the floor Saturday night and bring us to church Sunday morning. And I was blown away. It was not boring. And the sense of spirituality there that was on fire with activism. I gave a message for Pride March yesterday here in Echo Park, and I said, we believe that God is the spirit of Stonewall, the spirit that rises up when the people band together for justice. That's what God is. So I didn't leave Presbyterians because I was queer. I left because I was bored and because MCC had something different. And I've started to find that once you crack the nut of sexuality in religion, everything opens up. So we after we did the gay is good thing, then the terrifying feminist monsters came into being, and we even shook up MCC, I got to tell you. Our intention, essentially, I once said, was to put our hands down the throat of Christianity and turn it inside out. Because when you, again, it's gender, sexuality, patriarchy, hierarchy. When you start tearing all of those things out of your spirituality, you come down to a core of spirituality, I believe, that has nothing to do with the trappings that we think about, and everything to do with that essential first energy power of being. And I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead of your plan, but I want to say I find the question about whether spirituality and religious freedom are an important part of the LGBT blah blah community. I find the question a little bit, again, inside, let me turn it inside out, because queer spirituality has always been at the core of everyone's spirituality, of spirituality itself. Because that tearing apart perspective, that coming out of one reality into another reality, is what we are all about. It's why two-spirit people are called two-spirit people, for heaven's sake. It's why the witches and the warlocks and all these people that came before us were these spiritual people of their communities. Even in opposition, even when we are defined as the devil, we are having a profound impact on the nature of spirituality for everybody.
I agree completely. And also, people who are trying to form their own spiritual palette, right? To think outside the box, to not bang their head against the wall because Presbyterianism is boring. And I grew up Presbyterian, one side of my head is flat. So I completely understand. Those of us who think outside the box spiritually, those of us who live outside the box from an ethnic perspective, from the history of our people, from a religious aspect, all of those people, right? You were talking about patriarchy and hierarchy. And if all of us who have ever been oppressed banded together, right? Differently abled people, people who are living outside of the gender box, all of us said, enough. The patriarchy, the hierarchy, the oppression, it would all go away, because there are many more of us than there are of them. Even just nerds alone, there's more of us than there are of them. And you know, if we could, and I talk about this all the time, it's my spiritual mission, it's my mission as a queer person. If we could stop thinking of ourselves as separate and start thinking more of ourselves as the same, loving our individuality, loving who we are, but not thinking of this is my reality and that's your reality, and just said, let's all band together and end this, we could have more of the kind of world that we all want to live in. And I'm hoping that discussions like this, that things like Heather is doing with Keeping It Sacred, things like Founders has done for the last 52 years, all of those things are getting us to that place, to a kinder and gentler and more peaceful and loving world, because we're realizing, and nothing like a global pandemic, right? To show you that one thing can come, just one nasty viral thing, and affect every human being on the earth exactly the same way. And guess what? Somebody dying in Africa, and somebody dying in Chile, and somebody dying in Iceland, and somebody dying in the US are all dying the same way. We're made up of the same stuff. And what a surprise. We're not that different after all. And discussions like this, I think, help us get to that too. And also help people, like you said, to realize that spirituality is at the core of so many things you don't even think it's at the core of. I remember my mom telling me, I was one of those little kids that my mom would send me to synagogue with friends and send me to the Lutheran church and send me to the Catholic mass. She was always packing me up on the weekend and sending me to someplace with someone, so that I could see that everybody was the same and every religious institution was based on community and connection and love. That the teachings of Christ and the teachings of Buddha, it's all community, connection, and love. All of it is the same. And I think when I would say something as I was growing up, and we had moved to very conservative Orange County, and friends were saying stuff at school, and I was coming home and saying, I don't understand, I don't resonate with this. My mom would always say, that's not spirit, that's people. That's the word of people. And people is different. And I think when you said, Lucian, it really resonated about social justice and spirituality driving all of that. I so believe that our spirituality drives everything. Spirit, right, was at Stonewall. You know, spirit is at every pride. Spirit is there every time a queer person is exalted or is oppressed, or spirit is there witnessing and lifting us up and being part of it. And spirit does not belong to any religion. Spirit belongs to everyone. So queer people need to, you know, be okay with embracing that, and be okay with embracing their spirituality as a very entrenched part of their sexuality and their gender identity. I think it's beautiful what you said, my friend, and you know I'm such a fan of yours. I do want to ask you something though. I know that you have mixed into your Christianity a lot of what we would call alternative spiritual beliefs. When did you first get exposed to those? Was it when you went to college in 1969? When did you start seeing what was out there past different kinds of Christianity?
Okay, I'm going to say something a little bit strange. I always knew it was there. I was always tapped into something else. I can't remember how young I was when it occurred to me that it was mighty odd that the main force of the universe would want to rely on something like blood sacrifice to solve everything. That never made sense to me. So I was I didn't have language for it until later, like, you know, when in the college experience and the psychedelic experience and learning about Alan Watts, and I didn't have language for it, but I always knew something else was going on.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that's beautiful. I get it. I get that very much. Thank you, my friend. You're beautiful, and I'm so thrilled that you're here. Pastor Keith, Senior Pastor of Founders MCC. Boy, my friend, we couldn't have more different spiritual backgrounds, could we? Yet we have found a way to beautifully meet in the middle. And the day that you asked me to come on board as a staff pastor at Founders and become the Interfaith pastor was one of the happiest days of my life. And I thank the most beautiful Jerry's Deli, rest in peace, Jerry's Deli, for that beautiful day. So tell us a little bit about your background spiritually and how that fits in with your identification within this community.
I'm sure people will find this surprising listening to me talk, that I'm actually a Southerner. I know I kind of get thrown in the mix here in LA, but I'm from Eastern North Carolina. And like many Eastern North Carolinians, I came from a very conservative Christian church. In fact, we were Pentecostal, a church a denomination called the Church of God. Many splits off of that denomination, smaller ones, and then even Church of God of Prophecy, Assemblies of God, all of those are splits off of the original Church of God. And it was, like I said, very conservative and fundamentalist. And we thought only other Church of God people were the true children of God. I mean, the Baptists down the street, the Methodists down the street, they were going to hell. They weren't true Christians, because true Christians didn't wear jewelry and makeup, or women wear pants. It was very patriarchal as well. So I came from that mentality. But, and while I realize now a lot, if not most, of what I was brought up to believe was well-intentioned, but very wrong, just plain out wrong, and misinterpreted. We were extreme in the conservative movement, and I thought I was the only person that was attracted. I thought I was the only boy attracted to other boys. I thought I was the only teenager attracted to other teenagers. And I didn't know that there was such a thing as real gay people. That I thought that was like a Yeti, you know, that was like Bigfoot. It was something that you heard about, but they weren't really real. I mean, it was like cooties, you know, everybody had them at one time or another when they were children, but we really knew that there were no such things as cooties. So anyway, I know Alex just found out. I'm sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to burst your bubble there. So anyway, I grew up in the Church of God and then went off to a Church of God college. I mean, if I wasn't sheltered enough as a child, I kept putting myself in harm's way, or at least, you know, somewhat of harm's way. Here's the thing about extremist people. If they ever turn away from what they grew up in, they usually do a 180. They don't just do a 30 or a 50 or a 75 degree. They turn. They're still extreme. And so I'm kind of like, I did the 180 and I'm still extreme today when I found out that there were other gay people in the world. And in my Church of God college, where the books on homosexuality, I was a senior in college when I finally thought, okay, this is not a phase. I've been engaged to 2 females that didn't work out. And the last one told me she couldn't marry me because I was gay. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to deal with this, because if somebody's calling me out, I couldn't admit that to myself, much less here she is telling me, this is who you are, so you need to deal with it. And so I went to the school library. I mean, where else would you go, right? I went to the school library, and all the books on homosexuality were under the heading of abnormal psychology. And I found a book there, though, amidst all of those journals, those psychology journals, all of those things that said I was an abomination, all of those things that said something was wrong with me. There was a little paperback book stuck in between those volumes. And the name of the book was The Lord is My Shepherd and He Knows I'm Gay. And it was written by Reverend Troy D. Perry, who started the Metropolitan Community Church as a former Church of God pastor. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. And I'm not even the only Church of God one. And then I started looking around and realized that the Church of God breeds homosexuals even today. Whether they know it or not, or whether they can figure it out or not, or whether they're still stuck at the 180 mark on the other side, they're still there. So if there are any of you that haven't come out of the closet and we can't see you right now, happy Pride to all the Church of God gay boys and girls and intersex and all of the other queer folks in the Church of God. But someone mentioned a while ago not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And the one thing that or a couple of things I got from the Church of God, one was that we are spiritual beings and that there is such a thing as spirit. Now our language is the Holy Spirit. It doesn't matter to me what language other people use for that. Energy, universe, God. But I learned that there was something powerful that happened in our worship. And there was something powerful that happened when I made my own choices to live with God directing my steps and inviting God into my life, inviting that spirit into me to say, I want my life to have purpose and I want to help other people. And so, here I am today, all these years later, 30 years later, I am the pastor, well, that's 40 years later, I'm the pastor of the founding congregation of MCC. And I'm glad we have a rabbi with us. And I don't know if she even knows this part of our history, that we had, when MCC was started, Troy Perry started this, and then there were so many Jewish queer people coming to MCC, and he realized that they had some other cultures and even some other theology, and he said, well, hello, if we started this, I can help you start something. He wasn't trying to get rid of them. He was like, we're welcoming, we want you to be here, but we also know you have other traditions, and if you want to maintain those traditions, we're okay, and I'll help you get started. And he helped them get the first synagogue going. So
I served that synagogue for 6 years. That's right.
All
That's
right.
Yeah, no, definitely know that history, and it's so important.
Wonderful.
BCC was BCC because it came out of MCC.
MCC, that's right.
And those people all kept coming to church, by the way. There was a
Yeah.
whole row, like the first couple rows right in the front, people with prayer shawls on. It was just a trip and a half.
Awesome.
Love it.
Awesome.
Love it.
So I still believe in the move of the Spirit, and my language may be still old-timey language sometimes. But when I came to MCC, here's the funny thing. When I first went to MCC in Raleigh, North Carolina, because after I read Troy's book, I had to go home. By the way, I decided I wouldn't check out the book because I didn't want my name on the card. I didn't want my name associated with homosexuality. So I kept going back every day after classes to read a little bit more of it. And then I'd put it back where I found it. And the next day I'd go back and read some more. After I got finished with it, I was so mesmerized with it, I thought I have to read this again. So I went back to start reading it again, and it wasn't there. And the card was not in the card catalog either. So I don't know where that book came from or where it disappeared to, or if Spirit just put it there for me to read at the time that I needed it to save me. Troy Perry is alive and well today and comes to our church. Pre-pandemic, he was there every Sunday. He can hardly wait to get back to services in the next few weeks. And I tell people all the time, as a Christian, we say, well, Jesus saved my soul. but Troy Perry and MCC saved my life, saved my very life, and changed my way of thinking. The diversity that I go to church with every single week has changed who I am. Now I know that, you know, we're all recovering, those of us that grew up in church, we're all recovering from whatever that was. And we are changing, we are growing, we are becoming. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that it's never too late to start and to recognize that we've been changing all along and maybe didn't even know it. We were trying to hold on to the old landmarks, the people would say. Old folks, you better hold on to those old landmarks. And I'm like, well, you know, sometimes we need to hold on to something new and get a little strange going into the picture, right? And so I've turned into something very different and hopefully more open-minded to the things even yet that I don't understand or don't embrace for myself. But it may be working for someone else, and I don't want to take that away because I know that God, the God that I serve, can't fit into any box. So I've just not said I'm, you know, oh, I'm taking. I just wiped the box off the slate. There is no box anymore. There's no box, and I mean that didn't happen overnight. That took a lot of time, a lot of growing, a lot of praying, a lot of kicking and screaming. A lot of, I don't understand what I'm seeing, but I know it's real. And so I have to honor this because if this is working for someone else, who am I to take that away from this person? So I need to open myself up to see what, now I can work with Reverend Alejandro, and he's a former Catholic. And we thought Catholics were cults. I mean, we thought the Catholic Church was a cult when I grew up. I mean, they worship statues, for heaven's sake. And, you know, they worship Jesus's mama as much as they did Jesus. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And now but see, when you open your mind to understand, and even Jesus himself, whether you believe he's the Christ or not, if you know the teachings of Jesus are very prominent and are very similar to the teachings of most other prophets through the ages. And that is, he opened their minds to understand. Over and over, the King James Version says that. He opened their minds to understand. And I remember that being a prayer of mine through the years when I was a teenager and in my 20s and on up. Open my mind to understand, God, what's really going on. Help me to see beyond what the words on the page. Help me to see a person's experience instead of what they're told they have to experience. Let me see what they're actually experiencing. Let's put real life to this and real feet. Let's be the real hands and the real feet and the real heart of what God taught us, whether in whatever way God's speaking to us. So that's how I got to where I am. And I will tell you, it's a real honor. Who would have thought, you know, Troy Perry was a Southern Pentecostal boy that started MCC, and then he started the first 50 years, and I was the pastor of the same congregation that started the second 50 years. So I'm very honored to be another Southern gay boy Pentecostal that believes in the power of the Holy Spirit in whatever language you want to call that, and open enough to hear other people's experiences. Beautiful, my friend.
And an interesting story is Keith and I have known each other and really grown to become spirit family. He, I think, has become more interfaith in knowing me, and I have become more of a Christian in knowing him, because I grew up since I was 13 in a very conservative place where I saw the oppression and the repression, and I ran from Christianity. For many years, I wouldn't say God, I only said the universe. I wouldn't identify as Christian. I kind of ran into the New Age world and the world of the old Irish religion, of Irish Celtic paganism. Because of MCC and because of knowing Keith, and because of immersing myself in what my mom called the teachings of Christ Christianity, and how different that was from indoctrines Christianity, I now proudly call myself a Christian again. And I didn't think that would ever happen, but that was from knowing you. And I think that is something as queer people, that carries over into that responsibility in our community. Oftentimes, I'm spending time with another person within the queer community, and they've never met an intersex person before, and they don't even know what that is. I always say when I talk about it during my Saturday night spiritual services at Founders, after I say I'm interfaith, I'm intersex, oftentimes I will say, okay, take a minute to Google that, because people don't know. And what you said, Keith, was so beautiful about how your spirituality is constantly evolving and constantly broadening, and you're constantly growing and expanding. I believe as queer people, we should be doing that too. As new letters are added to the alphabet, as new sub-letters are added. You know, my 18-year-old spirit daughter can give you 20 sub-letters that go underneath every one of the letters. It's important for us as members of the community to acknowledge and embrace that, and to realize that as our spiritual palette is evolving, right, as we are becoming, as Rabbi Heather said, so is our queer palette, so is our understanding of what the queer community is. And that is also a part of human evolution. And so when somebody within our community comes up and says, well, you know, I identify as gay or lesbian or trans, but I'm also this, that, and 40 other things, then maybe we should open up to that and say, well, I don't really know what those other 40 things are, but maybe it's time for me to learn what those other 40 things are. Because as Troy Perry with MCC brought everyone together, right, including his Jewish brothers and sisters and non-binary humans, it's so important, I think, as queer people, as people who are quote unquote the underdog in society, that we embrace other people who are living and thinking outside the box, and who are also becoming and expanding, and embrace that and be the defenders and the champions of that, right? That's always been such a beautiful thing about the queer community, that we didn't just champion our own causes, but other people's causes as well. And I think that carries into other people's spiritual causes, right? Because as you grow and as you evolve, and I talk about this during my services all the time, you realize there are things outside of the box of your religion that interest you, that intrigue you, that you believe in, that resonate with you. And instead of stuffing those things down, like your fellow Church of God repressed gay friends, who one of whom I'm sure stole that Troy Perry book and snagged the card out of the card catalog, you know, we need to embrace that, learn about what we don't know, find out what our neighbor is doing. I have a very dear friend, Bill, and he performs at many of my services, performs music. He's very Jewish. He comes in his yarmulke and stands in front of the altar and sings pop songs, and he loves it. And he has learned so much about Christianity from being at these services, and so much about interfaith spirituality, yet he's no less of a Jewish person. And I think that's what you need to understand, that knowing that you are gay and then knowing a trans person should make you more expanded, but also make you more solidified in your sexuality, as spending time with a Jewish person makes you more understanding of what that is and the magic of that, but also more firmly ensconces you in who you are. And I think we as humans have this fear that if we expose ourselves to the other, we're going to lose who we are. And the truth is, the more you expose yourself to the other, the more you become more firmly rooted and seated in who you are. And I think that is one of the major points we're trying to get across in this event. And that's something to think about, both from a spiritual perspective and from an LGBTQIP2SAA perspective. And I thank you, my friend, for being here. It's an honor. I am honored by your presence on the earth. Reverend Alejandro Escoto is founder MCC's Spanish-speaking ministry head. He does our Spanish service every Sunday in the afternoon. Welcome, my friend. You're a beautiful soul, and I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
So tell us a little bit about your background spiritually, and also your background from a sexuality and gender perspective, and how those two things play together for you, my friend.
Oh, child, where do we begin? Well, I was born into a heavily Catholic Latino household. I was the firstborn in all of my families. I was the firstborn of two brothers. It was just me and my brother, and my brother died in March from COVID, so bless him. And so there were a lot of expectations of me being the firstborn. You know, if you're Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, you know, born into this machoistic, patriarchal, Mexican perspective, Catholic, you better get married and have children, because that's what's expected from you. And so growing up, I knew something was different. Growing up, I knew there was something off with me, you know, and I couldn't quite get my finger on it. And so every summer for 3 months, I go to Mexico, plus my time during December for Christmas vacation. And so it was during that time when my uncles used to make fun of me. My cousins used to make fun of me. But then, you know, I'd play with my older cousins, you know, behind these huge, you know, straw, you know, thingies for the, you know, for the horses and the, you know, and the cows and the outhouses. It's what we had back then. I would play with them, you know, what young, you know, what young children do. But it would be taken a step further, you know, developing this sexual inquiry. And I knew that there was something different about me, but I couldn't pinpoint it. So you know, my tias, my aunts, in my presence, because I used to love hanging out with my aunties, with my girl cousins, my tias would tell my mom, fíjate, Chelo, quiero que tu hijo va a crecer a ser maricón. Which translates to, guess what, Chelo, which is my mom's nickname. Her name was Consuelo Connie, so Chelo. She was like, guess what, Connie? I think your son's going to grow up to be a faggot. You know, that was the literal translation. I didn't know what maricón meant. I sure as hell didn't know. I'm sorry. I sure as heck didn't know what, you know, what faggot or, you know, all of that stuff meant. I didn't know, but I knew it wasn't good. I knew it wasn't good. So I'm taking all of this stuff in. You know, my dad was a Navy man. You know, my mom was from a little pueblo in Mexico who fought hard to survive in the States alongside my dad. She lived alone for many years when my dad was in the service. And the reality was she did the best that she could, knowing what she knew. But growing up, that wasn't enough for me. And so being involved in the Catholic Church and hearing the messages that were against what I felt, although I didn't understand it, there was something wrong with me. So I developed this perspective, this religious perspective, that I'm broken. You know, and so I used to pray to, you know, to the Christ, to the crucified Christ, you know, redeem me, you know, crucify me with you because I am no good. And so in living out all of this stuff, I came out when I was like 14 or 15 in high school. We're talking late 64, 74, 64, 74, 84. We're talking late, mid 80s. No. It was like early 80s. And not because I had an understanding of who I was, but because I was having night terrors. Because the kids in school, in Catholic school, they'd call me punk. They call me fag. They call me faggot. I didn't know what that meant. Here I am in high school. I didn't know what that meant. So here I am waking up at, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning screaming, mommy, I'm a fag. Well, my mom didn't know what that was. So she did what was the best thing. Everyone, you know, most of my family on my dad's side were educated. You know, I have an uncle who's a retired professor from university, dental fields, all that good stuff. Business owners. And back then, what they told my mom was, you got to change him. That's bad. So she took me to priest, took me to psychologist, psychiatrist, took me across the border to Tijuana, Mexico, to the curandero, which is a healer, you know, just to try to fix me. And that only made me angry and made me not be well, according to them, you know? And so when I finally left home to go to college, I embarked on a journey of self-loathing and misunderstanding. I sought understanding in all the wrong places, in a bottle with alcohol, sex, and drugs. The result was I became infected with HIV. You know, when I, you know, during that time, it was 15 years that my mom and I didn't talk to each other. We became estranged because I was gay. And so when I came out to her about being HIV positive, out of sheer guilt, she wanted to accept me. Come back home, I'll take care of you, I'll wash for you, I'll cook for you. She had this perception that I was gonna die, you know. But there's a saying in Spanish, mala hierba nunca muere, which means the bad weeds never die, you know. So I think I was gonna be around for a long time, all right? And ultimately, you know, I had, at that time, I had a life partner. We were together for 20 years before we separated some years ago. And my mom and I were able to restore our relationship. So when she died 8 years ago, we were great terms, you know, and so I was able to bury her with peace in my mind. Now, at the age of 19, I was invited to go to MCC by Jimmy Irving, Papa Jimmy Irving, who was the music director there. I used to work with him at UCLA. And like many, I walked into the church and cried. I bawled. I was like, this can't be true, you know, because it's going against everything I heard, everything I felt. You know, I felt like I sinned, so I lived sinful ways. I felt like God didn't love me, so I'm going to hell anyway. Might as well enjoy myself. You know, I'm broken. Who cares if I break myself? Who cares if I break others? And so over time, you know, as I got to know people at church, they used to ask me, you know, as I began to serve, Alex, you have such talents. Why don't you become, you know, why don't you go to seminary? Why don't you this and why don't you that? I was too broken to even, you know, acknowledge that. And it took many, many years. It took 15 years for me to finally get to a point where I could actually think that there was something good about me. 15 years. And
So,
so then, you know, Reverend Neil Thomas, who was the senior pastor back in 2001, submitted my name for ordination. It was a special ordination when Reverend Troy Perry retired, and I was angry. I was pissed. You want to see you want to see an angry little Latino man? Well, hang with me, you'll see him. You know, and that motivated me to go back to school, but it took several years. But in 1999, when I took over the pulpit as a volunteer pastor, because I loved the church so much, I waited for someone else to come and take over because I still didn't find myself worthy enough.
so
You know,
sweetheart,
my motto then was send a whale.
Alex, what would you say to someone who has rejected their spirituality because they're queer? Because you've been through that.
Yes, what I encountered was that my spirituality did not fit in the mold of human religion. And so I had to find my own spiritual journey. And I had to find my own spiritual healing, my own spiritual understanding. And that didn't fit in the mold. You know, Reverend Keith talked about there is no box, just get rid of the box. But I couldn't even find the lid to the box. How am I going to get out of the box, you know? And it took time for me to get out of it. And so as I began to develop the sense of self-worth and spiritual love, even through human religion, I then came to mold religion in a way that fit my needs. You know, not if you come to the, you know, to the 1:30 service, it's a hybrid service. You know, it's Catholic, charismatic, it's Pentecostal, because I am all of that and more. And now one of the challenges that I find now, because Hispanics and Latinx people at their core are caught in a lot of stigma and taboos, my own community will not accept me. Many will not accept me. One, because your priest isn't supposed to be outwardly gay. And two, he isn't supposed to live with HIV. So all of these things become an obstacle for many people within my own community, you know? And so through living testimony, the spirituality breaks down the barriers so that people can see past the religious stigmas and taboos that are often placed on ministers, priests, and pastors. You know, so my spirituality really does free me, but sometimes it becomes a burden for other people until they're able to walk and journey with me.
It's beautiful, my friend. So beautiful. Thank you for being here. You know I adore you, and I'm honored that you be here. Rabbi Heather, have any traditions formed between the intersection of your queer identity and your spirituality?
Well, I am, my
Reverend Alex?
pronouns are they, them. Right.
Reverend Alex? I just asked that to Rabbi Heather. I'm so sorry, sweetheart.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'd love to hear your answer too.
Yeah, I'll ask you next, Reverend Alex. I'm gonna ask
But,
you all. I'm gonna ask everybody that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when I served BCC, Beth Chaim Chadashim, it was really beautiful because, you know, that congregation had gone through the height of the AIDS epidemic when people were dying so often. And, you know, if I use one word to describe that congregation, I'd say it's tenderhearted. It's a very tenderhearted community, right? The way that people understand the tenuousness of life and death, the way that people understand hurt and pain. Everyone is afflicted by hurt and pain in some way. So understanding the affliction of the physical body is also a big part of it. And, you know, the way that they resurrected an old tradition, there was an old tradition where there's this one blessing called the Lecha Dodi, and you welcome in the Sabbath bride. And there's this whole thing about, you know, you come to temple and you praise God, you give gratitude, and then you kind of turn the service toward like the worship part of the service. And there's a tradition at BCC where just before that turn is made, they've inserted a part, it's called Hamakom Yanachem Etchem. It's may the one who comforts on high comfort and bring comfort to those who are here with us today. And that idea that the people who are in mourning, the people who are in the biggest pain of their life, seeing their loved ones dying and dying a hard experience of the death, that it was so tenderhearted to recognize that they might not want to be there at the service at the beginning when we're praising God and thinking about life and how beautiful it is. So they put in this blessing called Hamakom Yanachem Etchem, may God comfort you. And at that moment in the service, the mourners would come into the service, so that there was room for everyone. God is big enough to hold the highest joys of new love and new, babies and all of the beauty of life, just, cancer going into remission, all kinds of joys in life. And God is big enough to also hold the deepest sorrows and pain and hardest questions. So that idea that we can bridge those two, we can bridge the pain and the joy, really carries over into my own spirituality. I see the joy. And, again, I was doing that since my tumor, right? I could sense the death and I can feel the joy, and both of those things can coexist. So my spirituality really is expansive. We talk about an expansive spirituality where God can hold it all, and my own spirituality strives to hold all of it as well. And those of us who are clergy, we know that we might be burying someone and then naming a baby the next day or doing a wedding, and that's a huge roller coaster of experience, but we see it all, and so I strive to hold it all.
It's beautiful. And as clergy and as somebody who believes that we do our time here in soul school, Rabbi Heather, and then we go home and then we come back and do it again. To me, there is a joy in bringing life into the world, and there is a joy in watching somebody go home. And the idea that birth is great and death is bad. Well, no, because in some ways, death is a release into a better place, and birth is an awakening into this place that can be hard. So I think there is a beauty in both of those transitions. And I love that as clergy, we get to witness both of those things. Reverend Lucia, I have a question for you, my friend. Do you see is there a relationship between, Reverend Lucia, between the interfaith spirituality movement and the LGBTQIA+ AA community? I mean, for you, can you see the correlation between the two, Reverend Lucia, Pastor Lucia?
Yeah, because we cross all boundaries. We cross all borders. As queer people, our passport, we have passport that goes everywhere. And that's another way of living an interfaith consciousness, I think. A consciousness that recognizes the spiritual gems in multiple traditions, to be able to recognize the human gems in multiple contexts, to recognize the queer gems in multiple cultures. So it's like we're acting out the same play, just one with sexuality and gender, and one with theology.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll take that even a step further, my friend. I believe that learning to embrace interfaith spirituality and to understand that you are who you are. I always say, right, the world is a giant trailer park, and your own individual spirituality and identity, that is your specific trailer. Understanding that I am who I am and you are who you are, and Rabbi Heather is who Rabbi Heather is, and Pastor Keith is who Pastor Keith is, and Reverend Alejandro is who Reverend Alejandro is. Understanding that we all are who we are, yet we are all part of this we're all pieces of a giant pie called spirituality. I think that helps queer folks who maybe are having a hard time wrapping their heads around what is LGBTQIP2SAA. Why are there so many letters? What is all this stuff? Because we hear that all the time. I think to think about humanity, and some of us are Catholic, and some are Muslim, and some are New Age, and some are Jewish, and some are Christian, and some are agnostic, and some are atheist, but we're all humans, helps folks that are having a hard time with the expansion of what it is to be a member of the queer community understand that the letters are now up to 4, 6, 8, 9, 11, and probably next year there'll be 5 more. But we are all living in the trailer park of queer, and we all belong. Pieces of us are like each other, pieces of us belong with each other, but there are many pieces that are separate, but we're all still part of a whole. And I hope that as people embrace interfaith spirituality more, they think of it as embracing the whole, and also, really embracing your individual part of that. And the same thing with the community, so that all the letters in the community can get tighter and more understanding and loving of each other. That I think is such an important thing. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I must say, I think strings of letters are a piss poor way of trying to describe a community. pardon the language, but it just, I don't know what else to say. We need a word.
Yeah.
We need another word, because even with that long string of letters you just spit out, you left out SGL.
Of course.
You left out, and there
I
are
left so many. That's just the community standard right now. That's why I'm
and the
using
community standard is standardly white.
it.
Okay.
Of course.
And we need to deal with that. So we
Yeah.
don't have language to put around who we are and what we're doing.
I agree. I agree. I would love
I
it as the interfaith, the interfaith symbol, right, is all the spiritual symbols in a circle. I would be thrilled if we were just one giant pink bedazzled Q and all of our flags could surround it. That
Careful about the Q these days, honey. Careful about the Q.
Oh, I love the Q. I'm taking the Q back. I love the Q. I know nothing's. Yeah, I live with a teenager. Everything's canceled. I understand. I'm an old lady and everything is canceled. But thank you, my friend. Pastor Keith, one of our viewers right now is asking, does MCC teach congregants its own history?
Well, I think it's up to the individual churches how much they teach. If there is history listed on our denominational website, and it's brief. There's no way they're going to cover 52 years in 2 paragraphs kind of thing. I try to get as much of our history in as possible. In my sermons, I try to bring in some of our history, and especially during Pride Month, I think it's important for us to remember where we've come from, where we've come through all of this, and to bring up those, and how did we celebrate Pride? I asked that this morning in church to our online viewers. How did we celebrate Pride? And when we couldn't be out in parades and protests this year, last year, like we have been doing for 50 years. And in thinking of my own answer to that, one of the things I did was watch history. There's some wonderful documentaries out right now. I worked with our archives team in my own congregation, which Lucia is a part of, and we brought some of those video clips and pictures out from the past in order to share those things. So are we required to teach our history? No, we aren't. In all of our membership classes, we do. At our church and every church I've pastored, which has been 3 different churches, we have made that a part of our membership class to share part of that, as well as to bring to attention books that a lot of our church leaders have written over the years, namely Troy Perry, a movie, Call Me Troy, that people can see free on YouTube and see a bit of our history. And so no, it's not required. Yes, I think we should be teaching it. And I think we do a fair enough job. We are working on something for the denomination, not just for ourselves. We're not trying to hold it all back at Founders. Our archives team is working on a website that will bring a lot of this archival history to light so that it is easily accessible. Because I don't know about y'all, I ain't getting no younger. I'm crossed over that hill a while back, and I'm like, y'all, if we're gonna get this stuff out, we might need to do it before we all pass away and these youngsters just put it in a closet and say, I don't know what that's about. So hopefully other people are doing that. By the way, if we're in the trailer park, I could have a drag name. I was thinking Iona. I could be Iona Trailer.
I love it. I think that's wonderful. Yes, I will be Irenta. I rent a trailer.
You can be Irenta. I love that.
Because I think that even sounds a little more scary than Iona. So Iona and Irenta.
Someone else could be Alisa.
Yeah, I'll come over and I'll bring the Kool-Aid and the little Debbie snack cakes.
Please do. The
And
ho-hos and the ding-dongs.
Right, and we'll watch Price is Right, Wheel of Fortune.
All right.
It's fantastic, my friend. Reverend Alejandro, for you, what do you think Reverend Alejandro, that queer clergy, like all of us, right? That what have we and what can we teach our straight counterparts, heterosexual clergy members?
I find this a lot, and I encounter it a lot, that I think all clergy, regardless of how you identify, would understand the spirit is fluid. And once people begin to realize that, so is sexuality. Sexuality is fluid. And I believe that's one of the greatest challenges, because unless you're able to break out of that binary box and see how people can express themselves fluidly, you know, gender and sexually and spiritually, then they'll be able to really be a blessing unto other people. Some years ago, it was, I used to speak at the World AIDS Day event, sponsored by Bienestar, over at La Placita Olivera. And over time, over many, many years, they kept talking about secularizing the event and taking away all the religious influences. They kept saying it every year, and never happened. The last year that it was at La Placita, the parish priest asked me, "Oh, Reverend Alejandro, what are you going to talk about?" And I told him my thoughts, you know, about World AIDS Day and this and that. Well, he used a good amount of what I had shared in his little spiel, you know, which was fine, because otherwise who knows what he would have said. Because in years past, I used to tell them, no, that has nothing to do with World AIDS Day. And so if we allow ourselves to be fluid, just as Spirit does, then we allow ourselves to be open. Over years, that parish priest understood the importance of open your mind and open your heart. So I think he knew how generous I was in my fluidity, that in sharing what I was thinking, you know, I had to think of something else. So thank God. I don't know whether it makes sense or not, but I guess they liked it. Yeah. So that's one. So if those 2 points, spirit is fluid and so is sexuality. And if we can embrace that, then we break down the binary.
Absolutely. I agree. You know, a couple of years ago, I was asked to speak at a friend's memorial in the Inland Empire, so an hour inland from Los Angeles. And as I was walking through this church, I was realizing it was getting progressively more and more fundamentalist as I walked in. And then the house pastor from the church, the senior pastor at the church, asked to open up the memorial and speak. And it was very evangelical. And I had prepared something very interfaith and very new agey, because that fit more where my friend was. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be a lot. So he did his thing, and then people spoke, and then they brought me up to speak, and I talked about, you know, everything in its own right time, and when it's your time to go, and how my friend would be happy that she, you know, lived her life the way she was supposed to, and it was time to go home to Spirit, and, you know, all my interfaith talk. And I could see him in the back watching, and I thought, because I grew up in a conservative place where I was always the nerd, you know, the weirdo for not believing what everyone else believed. So afterwards we were having refreshments, and he walked over to me, and I thought, oh my goodness. And he said, "Where are you pastored again?" And I said, Metropolitan Community Church in Hollywood. And he kind of gave me the eye, because, you know, he's probably heard that before from the little queer ones that have brought that up to him. And then he said, "I have to admit, when I saw your name on the roster, I wasn't so sure." But that was a very wonderful and moving talk. And it made me realize that two people from completely different backgrounds that essentially have very different spiritual and social ideologies can come together for the sake of someone who has passed or is born or is getting christened or bar mitzvahed or whatever the situation is, and speak on the same stage and see in each other the commonalities. Because I'm no evangelical, but I thought what he said was beautiful. And he certainly is not anybody who would identify as interfaith, but what I said resonated with him. And I think that was my point at the very beginning of this today, was that we all, if we just open up, we can all resonate with each other. And that's really how it should be. We are one human family, and we have to always remember that. Rabbi Heather, closing thoughts. It's in your closing thoughts, please add this, my friend. Where are you hoping that we're all going in the intersection between spirituality and our queer identification?
So good, thank you. Closing thoughts are, well, I'll start with the last one first. Where I hope that we're going is I hope that we just continue to nurture the creativity that each of us has. This creative energy of, you know, because we're out of the box, because we've exploded the box, because there was no box, and people who control boxes, you know, are limited and limiting. That this idea that I hope that all of our creative energies and our creative pursuits of understanding things outside of a box will, you know, continue to infuse into our spirituality and into our spiritual ritual and to the ways that we look at sacred texts and the ways that we experience them and the prayers that we write. And the second is, I wanted to also leave us with, from this book, there's a little excerpt that I wanted to read. This is called Where Pride Dwells, and it's a repository of Jewish life and ritual works. I do have a work in here that actually Alejandro has used and that we've used for the Interfaith Pride celebration, a blessing called Remembering from Where We Come, which reminds me of what Reverend Keith was talking about before. We should always remember from where we come. But I'm actually not going to read my own blessing. I wanted to read just an excerpt of one written by Rabbi Reuben Zellman, who was the first openly trans student in rabbinical school that was accepted into the program. And he was in my class. And he talks about being twilight people. This is part of a blessing that he wrote for the changing of the day to the night. And he wrote, all of us have many identities and loves, many genders and none. And all of us are in between roles and at the intersection of histories. All of us are crisscrossed paths of memories and destinations, streaks of light swirled together. We are neither day nor night. We are both neither and all. So that's just a little excerpt of this blessing called Twilight People, a prayer for trans Jews. And I just, I hope that, you know, each of us learns from the trans community, and those of us who are in the trans community appreciate that this idea that we are ever expansive and across all borders, and borders are human constructs, and it's important to just embrace who we are and create. So thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
So beautiful, my friend. Thank you. And where can people find you? Where can people find Keeping It Sacred?
Please find Keeping It Sacred at keepingitsacred.com, and on Instagram at Keeping It Sacred, or me at Hey Rabbi. That's HEA Rabbi for Heather. And there you'll also find my new book called Resolutions. It's #1 on Amazon right now. So it's all about spiritual self-repair. And I have had Christian pastors and reverends tell me that this is a really good book for the Lent season as well. I wrote it for this season just before the high holidays, a very introspective season of doing spiritual work and spiritual self-repair. Thank you so much.
My friend. Always an honor to be in your presence, and I appreciate you doing this today.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
Reverend Lucia, same question for you, closing thoughts, and how are you hoping that we're evolving as spiritual people, as people in the LGBTQIA community, and how what are you hoping to see in the future, Reverend?
I think that I think what's really important to me is that we take our process and our theological, you know, opining, and our you know, trying to think it through, and take it back into the streets. Take it back into where the people are. Take it back where the grassroots are. Take it back where the activism is. You know, once we activated the activists, now we need the activists to reactivate us. because our whole understanding of what it means to be together is radically changing. And to be honest, I think our queer community has slid a little bit behind in some of that reconciliation and resolving of our issues. And we're in a key place to do it because, once again, we are everywhere. Some of us are everybody. So if we can figure it out among us, we can be that germ again that sprouts into new wheat.
I agree. That's beautiful. And it's so important. I think we have a tendency, both as spiritual people, Pastor Lucia, and as people within the queer community, to preach to our own choir. And it's so very important that we get out to those voices that haven't heard us. And even if they are not going to become Christian or Jewish or Muslim or New Age or whatever we are, maybe that seed is going to form and they're going to start to think and become something.
And first of all, before we go out to preach, let us go out to listen.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you, my friend. Where can people find you? Where is the best place to find you?
Email is justice@mccla.org. And here, anywhere you find FMCC, I'll probably be close by.
I love that about you. And I'm looking forward to having you speaking at my service again. I would love that.
Right on.
Pastor Keith, what about you, my friend? Final thoughts, and also where are you hoping the next step is? Where are we going next in the evolution of ourselves as spiritual beings and also members of the queer community?
One of our former pastors here in Los Angeles, the first time I heard her preach, her name is Nancy Wilson, not the famous singer, but the famous second moderator of MCC. Reverend Nancy Wilson said this in her sermon, and coming from my background, this was pretty radical. She said, question everything. Question everything you know, question everything you've been taught, question everything. Don't be afraid to question everything. Question God and seek what you want to know, what answers you're seeking. You can find them, but you can't find them if you don't ask. So keep asking the questions. And I was about to pick up where Lucia left off. Where are we going, and where do I see church and spirituality happening? You know, most Christian churches are losing members. Most people are in today, and the generations, my cousins that are my first cousins, twice removed and 3 times removed and 4 times removed. Some of those are not interested in going to a building, to church anymore, to temple, to worship. They want to know what we're doing. How are we living out our faith? Whatever that faith is, they don't even care what the faith is. Even if you don't claim to have any faith, that's faith in nothing. So how are you living out your faith? How are you, they want to know from day to day, how are you spending your time? How are you using your energy? That's going to make a difference, not just in their individual lives. It's not a selfish thing. They're not saying, what are you doing for me? They're saying, what are you doing for others? And I had to go back and realize that those were the words of Jesus. Those were the words of the other prophets, the Jewish prophets. Those were the words of Buddha. Those were the words of Confucius. Those were the words of everyone through the ages that really, whether they're famous or not, who actually did make a difference. It's because they went out and made a difference. They didn't just talk about it. So I don't have to go out and preach very much. I just have to go out and listen and do something that will make life better for those around me. So that's where I see. And I was talking to our last moderator, the one before we have the one we have now, and she said, you know, I said, where do you see the future of Metropolitan Community Church? because more and more mainline churches and religions are opening their doors to the rainbow community. Maybe we can be the rainbow community. Maybe that's what it is, and get rid of
I
all
love
the.
that.
We're just
I
the
love
rainbow community. But she's, and her answer kind of startled me. And she said, we have to quit trying to find everybody like us. We have to look at the gender fluid people. That's the future of the church. As we know the church and as we don't know the church. And if we're going, we have to be the place where it's happening for those people that are different than what we have been used to and what we have gotten ourselves used to. And so that's where I hope that we're going. I hope that we're being more and more open to whoever walks in our doors and whatever their faith system, whatever works for them. And if they see something in on my plate from the salad bar, Sheena, if they see something on my plate that looks good for them, they say, oh, I'll have a little bit of that with mine.
Sure.
And if I see a little something that I haven't tried on their plate, well, then I might have a little taste of that too. And we'll just share in this salad bar together.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I talk a lot.
You can find, yes, she'll fill you in. You can find me at Rev Keith, REBKEITH, Rev Keith at MCCLA. That's Metropolitan Community Church of Los Angeles, by the way.
Beautiful. Thank you, my
Go
friend.
ahead,
An honor to have you here. And Reverend Keith is talking about the spiritual salad bar, which I think I bring up at every single one of my Saturday night spiritual services, that, you know, when we go to eat at a salad bar, hometown buffet, we see a lot of things that we like and a lot of things we don't like, and a lot of things we like but don't want to put on our plate. Yet we make our plate and our friends make their plates and everyone in the restaurant makes their plates, and we all sit together with different plates, but no one is resentful of, why did you take the onions? People who take the onions are going to hell. We just simply say, I don't want that for my plate. And why can't we do that from a spiritual perspective as well? Whatever you like resonates on your spiritual salad bar plate. Things you don't want or don't believe in, you simply don't take, but it's okay if someone else does. And I think we need to think of the rainbow community the same way. The rainbow bar. You don't have to be something within the letters of the rainbow community. You don't have to be something in order to acknowledge that it's okay for someone else to be that. I've had situations where people got very confrontational with me about my bisexuality. And I always say, look, I'm not asking you to be that. I'm just telling you that's what I am. And I think that makes our sexual and gender identity, our sexuality and gender identity, and our spiritual identity very similar in that respect. And just let people be who they are. We're all part of Spirit's rainbow. Spirit is for everyone. And we're exactly as God has made us. Reverend Alex, closing thoughts. Where do you hope we are going and how can we find you?
Well, I'm going to start by saying this. Some years ago, two friends managed to get us in at Club Tempo once a month to do outreach. For the first year, it was a lot of boos. Boo, boo. We don't want the church here. You know, they thought I was, there to tell people stop drinking, stop this and stop that. But then something happened the second year. I was on Channel 34. I was on the Spanish news station. Something happened. I don't quite know. And the reason I mentioned that is because all of you had touched on the key point of service. They would know we are believers. They will know that we are keepers of the faith by our works. I don't remember what happened, but when they introduced me on that one Sunday of the month at Club Temple, people stood up and they applauded. And the boo stopped from that moment on. So what can I hope for? That especially in the Hispanic and Latinx community, that our works can break down the stigmas and the taboos that so often are interwoven into religion. That they don't so much focus on what I am and how I am, but rather what I am now and how I got here. and that they too can experience that journey of hope and healing. Because for a lot of LGBTQ plus people, religion and spirituality, that's a tough boat to get on, especially when it gets stormy. And so if we can bring calm to the storm and allow spirituality to really show people, religion will lead you to the bread and the sandwich meat and the mustard and the tomatoes and all that stuff. And spirituality shows you how to put it together and share it. And then maybe we can break down those human constructs.
Beautifully said, my friend. Where can we find you online?
Are you ready? It's gonna take a while to write this down. Rev Alejandro. It's REV as in Victor, ALEJANDRO at mccla.org.
Beautiful. My friends, Rabbi Heather Miller, Pastor Lucia Chappelle, Reverend Keith Mozingo, Reverend Alejandro Escoto. You are all a piece of my heart and all a piece of my spiritual pie. I appreciate you all. I appreciate you being here. I am Reverend Sheena Metal. I'm the Interfaith pastor at Founders MCC. I'm the founder of raisingthevibration.org, a spiritual movement of peace, love, kindness, and unity. You can find me there and at sheenametalspiritual.com. I am so proud to be on the advisory board of directors of the Lavender Effect. And please, if you are interested in what you saw today, visit all of my panelists by emailing them or visiting their websites. And if you'd like to sign up for our email and learn more about future events, it is thelavendereffect.org. I hope you are left with this. I hope you are left with the idea that we are ever expanding spiritual entities, that we are ever expanding members of the rainbow, and that we as a part of both the LGBTQIA community and as a part of the spiritual community, we are constantly forming and changing and growing and evolving our spiritual palette, our sexuality palette, our gender identity palette, and that's perfectly okay. Keep an open mind, an open heart, and an open soul for your own reality and also for the reality of everyone else on the planet. And remember that we are all in this together, my friends. We are one human family under one beautiful, benevolent source. And it doesn't matter what you call that source. It only matters that it is, that it's beautiful, and that it's holding your hand in its beautiful hand of light and helping you walk down your spiritual path. Be proud, my friends. Be proud of everything you are. Be proud of your sexuality. Be proud of your gender. Be proud of your spirituality. Be proud and be honored and be thankful and blessed that Spirit has chosen you to put you on this earth for this lifetime to just be you and to make a difference in everyone's life just by being yourself. You are all a tiny wheel, a tiny cog, a tiny belt in this giant machine that is the universe. And Spirit loves you all. And so do I. Thank you to the Lavender Effect for hosting this. Please visit us at thelavendereffect.org. Please look me up. I'm very accessible. Please look up my panelists. We're honored to be here with you all today. And I thank you all. Thank you for being here. And keep thinking, keep feeling, keep loving, keep being. And let's do this again soon. And I hope to see you. Thank you, Andy.